My parents slammed the door on my 14-year-old son, so I drained our shared account. He walked over with gifts and they said, "Only real family." I cut them off, but they never expected what I did on New Year's Eve. If this story pulled you in, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. I wasn't supposed to work Christmas Eve. One of the newer nurses had begged for the day off to fly home and surprise her dad, and I said yes without really thinking it through. I figured I'd be home by 800 and we'd still have time to do our little traditions. Matching pajamas, hot cocoa, the same movie we always watch and make fun of like it's the first time. What I didn't know was that while I was elbow deep in charts and trying to calm down a combative patient who insisted the nurses were stealing his slippers, my 14-year-old son was getting dressed in his best clothes, slipping his savings into his jacket pocket, and walking 3 miles through the cold with a bag of hand-wrapped presents. He had planned it weeks in advance. He told me later he checked the bus schedule, but it wasn't running that day, so he walked. And when he got there, after almost an hour in the wind, he knocked on their door with a hopeful smile and numb fingers. He bought them things they'd like, not just cheap filler gifts. I mean, he paid attention. He got my mom the exact brand of lavender candle she always used to light in the kitchen. My dad's gift was a vintage-style fishing hat from that outdoor store he loved but never wanted to spend money in. And for my sister, he found this weird enamel pin shaped like a tomato can. It was an inside joke from when she used to babysit him. He thought it would matter. My mom opened the door, looked at him, looked at the bag, and said, "We're keeping it small this year, only real family." Then she shut the door in his face. He stood there for a minute, probably thinking it was a mistake, like maybe she'd come back. Maybe she was joking, but no one opened the door again. No porch light flicked on. No one called to check on him. He walked home alone, didn't call me, didn't message, just walked. I got home around 8:30, exhausted and ready to crash. But there he was, curled up on the couch with his jacket still on, like he hadn't even made it to his room. The bag of gifts was next to the door, still full. At first, he didn't want to tell me, said everything was fine. I noticed the red around his eyes, the way he didn't touch the dinner I brought home, and then I saw the label sticking out of one of the unwrapped presents. He finally told me quietly, "No drama, no tears, just facts. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry either. I just listened and something shifted inside me." Years of swallowed words, overlooked comments, the way they always treated me like a mistake they had to deal with. It all lined up in my head like pins waiting to fall. I made a few quiet changes that night. Nothing dramatic, no threats, just decisions. And by midnight, my dad was blowing up my phone like the house was on fire. I didn't answer his calls, not that night, not the next morning. I knew exactly what those missed calls were about, and I didn't feel like listening to excuses wrapped in fake concern. Instead, I let my son sleep in. I made pancakes the way he likes them, too many chocolate chips and no syrup. We didn't say much over breakfast. But I could feel something between us, this quiet understanding. He wasn't going to bring it up unless I did. So I did. I asked him if he wanted to go back there. He looked at me for a long second and shrugged, said he didn't care, but I could tell he did. He wanted to understand why. Why they looked at him and decided he wasn't enough. Why they opened the door to a kid who came with gifts and closed it like he was a stranger selling coupons, so I told him to grab his jacket. I packed the presents back in the bag. We drove over. They weren't expecting us. My mom opened the door, still in her robe with one of those tight smiles she uses when she doesn't want a neighbor to know she's pissed. My dad was behind her, already looking annoyed like we'd showed up to ruin something. I didn't wait for them to speak. I walked past them into the living room and sat down. My son followed me, quiet as ever. There wasn't yelling. I think that's what rattled them. I didn't accuse or cry or throw a scene. I just placed the bag on the table and told them what happened, word for word. My mom immediately started with the justifications. She said she didn't recognize him right away, that she thought he was a neighbor kid, that they had a long day, that it was cold, that they didn't think he was alone. My dad jumped in all defensive, saying they never told him not to come, they just didn't know he would. I let them talk. Then I asked one question, just one. Would you have shut the door on my sister's kid? Silence. Then my dad said something about how I was overreacting, that it was just a misunderstanding. That if I was going to blow it out of proportion, maybe we should just leave. I didn't argue. I just told them to check the balance of the shared account. My mom frowned. My dad pulled out his phone. I watched his face change. The money was gone. Every last dollar I had contributed over the past few years. Home repairs, vacation expenses, emergency vet bills, my sister's car, all of it. I paid more than I should have. I always did because I thought we were family. My dad looked up at me like I'd slapped him. My mom actually looked scared. I stood up, told my son we were leaving, and walked out without another word. They didn't follow us, but they would. And what came next? They didn't see that coming either. They didn't call the next day or the day after that. But on the third morning, there was a gift basket on the porch wrapped in cellophane and red ribbon with one of those generic tags that just said, "Happy Holidays" in glittery font. Inside was a log of meat no one eats, stale crackers, and a wheel of cheese that looked suspiciously warm. No note, no names. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's mistake. Then another one came the next day. This time, it had a fuzzy throw blanket, a tiny Bluetooth speaker, and a tin of cookies you could break your teeth on. Still no card, still no message. By the end of the week, it looked like we'd robbed a gas station gift aisle. 3 baskets, 2 boxes of candy, an inspirational wall plaque that said, "Family is forever." A pair of Christmas mugs that read Grandma's favorite and Grandpa's buddy. My son didn't touch any of it. He barely looked at it. They thought they could buy their way back in. Thought gifts would smooth over the fact that they left a 14-year-old boy standing alone in the cold. Thought shiny paper and sugar would erase the message they sent loud and clear. "You're not one of us." Made me sick. I didn't say much to my son about it. I could see he was trying not to care, but I also knew he was hoping it meant something. That maybe, just maybe, they'd call. Maybe they'd say sorry, maybe they'd come see him, but they didn't, not until New Year's Eve morning. I got a text from my dad coming by around 400. "Let's talk, no question mark, no if that's okay, just an order like he still got to decide when people owed him their attention." I didn't text back, I didn't tell my son either. I just made up my mind. They pulled into the driveway exactly at 400. My dad in that ugly brown jacket he wears to everything, my mom in a sequin sweater like we were about to throw a party. He had a bottle of grocery store wine in one hand, and she was carrying a shiny gift bag like this was going to end with hugs and photos. I opened the door, let them stand there for a few seconds. Then I stepped aside without a word. They walked in like they owned the place. My mom complimented the wreath on the door. My dad asked where everyone else was, like he expected a full family gathering. No one sat down. I didn't offer them anything. I waited. My mom started first talking about how they'd had time to reflect, how hard the holidays were for everyone, how maybe feelings had gotten hurt. My dad jumped in and said it was a misunderstanding, that of course they loved their grandson, that it had been blown out of proportion. Then came the worst part. My mom handed my son that mug from the basket, Grandpa's buddy, like it was some kind of peace offering, and that was it, that's all they had. So I looked at both of them and said, "You had 5 minutes, they're up." They blinked. My dad narrowed his eyes. I told them I meant what I said. "You shut the door on my son, so I'm shutting the door on you. He came to you with love, with gifts, and you turned your back on him. You don't get to come in here now and pretend that didn't happen." My mom started crying. My dad said I was being cruel. I told them to leave, and they did. Not a word on the way out. My dad slammed the wine bottle down on the table as they passed like that was going to hurt me. My son stepped out from the hallway. He didn't say anything, just walked over and hugged me long and quiet. We didn't go anywhere for New Year's. No party, no family countdown, nothing loud. Just the two of us, burgers on the stove, an old comedy playing on TV, and the calm that comes when you finally stop pretending. But this wasn't over. Not yet. I still had one last thing to say. The wine bottle sat untouched on the kitchen table for 2 days. Neither of us mentioned it. It became part of the silence, like all the other things we chose not to say out loud. Then on the second night, my son knocked it over accidentally while we were taking down the last of the decorations. It shattered across the tile like it had been waiting for permission to break. Neither of us flinched. The next afternoon, I asked him if he wanted to keep anything from the pile of gifts, the speaker, the mugs, the tins of candy. He didn't even look up from his sketch pad, just said no. So we took it all out to the backyard. I dragged out the old fire pit from the shed, the one we hadn't used since last summer, and stacked everything in. Every basket, every cheap trinket, every desperate gesture in glitter and plastic wrap. We stood there in the cold, just the two of us watching it burn. The blanket curled up in the flames almost instantly. The mug exploded with a pop that made both of us laugh. Wasn't anger, not anymore. It was something else, like cleaning up after a storm that had already passed. I thought that would be the end of it, that we could finally breathe, but around 200 a.m., my phone started ringing. Unknown number. Straight to voicemail. A few minutes later, another different number, then a third. On the fourth call, I picked up who is my sister. I hadn't spoken to her in over 6 months. She lives a couple hours away. Rarely visits, never calls. She's good at staying on the sidelines, neutral, detached. He'll know. She started in immediately, asked what the hell I thought I was doing. Said mom had been crying for days. That dad was barely speaking, that draining the account was spiteful, that I'd gone too far. I let her go on, then I asked her one thing. Where were you when your nephew stood on their porch alone with gifts in his hands? Silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. They're talking about selling the house. I blinked. What? The account? It wasn't just savings. Dad was planning to use it to fix up the house, maybe list it this spring. That money was part of everything. They're panicking, fighting about what to do now. So that was it. It wasn't about regret. It wasn't about my son. It was about the money, I told her plainly. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I gave more than I ever should have, and I never asked for anything in return except basic decency. Then I said, you don't get to abandon a child and expect the house you built on that kind of rot to stand. She hung up. 2 mornings later, my mom showed up alone, no car in sight. She must have parked around the corner. No makeup, no dramatic coat, just her standing on my porch like someone who forgot why they came. She didn't knock, didn't ring the bell, just stood there holding something. I watched her from the window. She stayed for maybe a minute, then placed the item on the doorstep and walked away without looking back. It was a photo, a printed picture. My son, maybe 6 or 7, sitting on her lap, his arms around her neck, both of them laughing. One of those blurry, perfect moments you forget you even took. Taped to the glass frame was a sticky note, just 2 words written in her neat, slanted handwriting. I forgot, that was it. Not I'm sorry, not I was wrong, just a confession that sat heavier than anything else she could have said. It wasn't about shame, it wasn't even about guilt. It was about realizing that the center of everything, the part they thought would always orbit around them, had shifted. And that scared them more than anything. But they weren't the ones I was thinking about anymore. Because the real story, the one that mattered, was just beginning. New Year's Day was quiet. No calls, no texts. The porch stayed empty. The silence felt unfamiliar but not bad. Like a room after everyone's left, still honest. We made pancakes again. My son added way too many chocolate chips. I let him. We spent the afternoon reorganizing his room. He wanted to take down some old posters and start fresh. New year, new walls. I helped him hang up a photo he took himself from a hiking trip we did back in the fall. It wasn't the best picture, a little crooked, some glare, but he liked it, said it felt real. Around sunset, while we were finishing up, I got a message from my dad. We're outside, please come out, we need to talk. I looked at my son, he looked at me. I asked if he wanted to stay inside or come. He said, I'm not hiding. So we walked out together. They were both there standing near their car. My mom looked pale. My dad had that stiff posture he gets when he's about to pretend he's in control. They had something in their hands. I already knew what it was. Gifts, 2 new bags, shiny paper, too much tape. One had my son's name on it. The other had mine. I didn't touch them. My dad started first like always. Said they'd made mistakes, that they'd been caught up in their own stress, that the holidays bring out the worst sometimes, that they'd been raised differently, not used to showing emotion. It was a lot of words. Then my mom stepped forward and said they wanted to make things right, that they missed their grandson, that they didn't want things to end like this. Then they asked if we'd consider having dinner, just the 4 of us, a fresh start. I let them speak. I didn't interrupt. Then I asked them to look at the door behind me. I said, remember Christmas Eve? Remember how cold it was? Remember what you said to him when he came to your door holding gifts? You didn't just reject a visit. You rejected a person, a kid who wanted to love you. Now you're here with bags and apologies expecting what? A do-over. They didn't answer. I told them plainly, this door, it's not open anymore. You taught my son that family has limits, that love in your house is conditional. So now I'm teaching him the opposite, that he doesn't have to accept disrespect just because someone shares his blood. They stood there like they couldn't believe it. My dad said, so you're really doing this? I nodded. My mom tried to hand me the gift bag. I didn't move. My son turned and walked back inside. I followed him in. They didn't knock again. We watched from the window as they stood there a little longer, then finally put the bags down and drove off. I waited until they were gone. Then I picked up both bags, walked to the trash bin, and dropped them in. It wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. My son didn't ask what was inside. He never will. And just like that, the last door closed. But inside our home, something else opened. Something stronger, something real. We didn't talk about it much after that. Not because we were avoiding it, more because we didn't need to. There was nothing left to explain. The next few days felt different, lighter, like the air in the house had changed. I hadn't realized how much space they'd taken up, even when they weren't around. The kind of weight that makes you tired without knowing why. It was gone now. I saw the photo my mom had left sitting on my son's dresser one afternoon. I asked if he wanted to keep it. He looked at it for a few seconds and said, "Not really." I nodded and took it without a word. We didn't need reminders. We were making new ones. We didn't hear from them again. No more calls. No more baskets. My sister texted a few vague things about keeping the peace, but I didn't respond. Peace doesn't live where people pretend nothing happened. On January 6th, my son surprised me. He used some of his leftover Christmas money, the money he didn't spend on gifts that ended up in the fire, to book us a weekend away, just a cheap little cabin a few towns over, nothing fancy. He showed me the receipt like it was nothing. He said, "I thought it'd be cool if we started our own thing." So we packed up snacks and books, loaded the car, and went. It snowed the second night. We stayed up late playing cards by the fireplace, drinking instant cocoa, and talking about the weirdest dreams we'd ever had. At one point, he looked around the room and said, "I like this, just us." It hit me harder than I expected, not because it was new, but because of how right it felt. There was no tension, no waiting for someone to say the wrong thing. No tight smiles, no fake laughter, just calm, just truth, just us. He's growing fast, taller than me now, his voice deeper. He still tries to act like certain things don't bother him, but I know better. I also know he watches how I move through the world, how I respond to disrespect, to forgiveness, to love. And that's what this whole thing became. Not about revenge, not about money, not even about proving a point. It was about showing him where the line is and what to do when someone crosses it. We came home from the cabin refreshed. We didn't bring back souvenirs, we didn't need to. What we built there came home with us. And this year we'll build more, traditions that belong to us. No shame, no guilt, no waiting on people who left us standing in the cold. They closed the door first.